Hello, Dr. Ajit. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. So I'll start with a question. So why is the Indian population so vulnerable to CAD? Is it our lifestyle, our food, or our genetics? What do you think influences it?
Well, it was always considered that there was a genetic issue with Indians because South Asians, whether they live in India or they live in UK or they live in US, they always had higher coronary artery disease than Caucasians.
Okay.
Number two, they were much leaner. They were much, smaller weight size. They don't eat as much as, say, the Caucasians or many other groups do. And still, they seem to have a higher incidence of coronary artery disease. So technically, the problem was simply that, the environmental issues, which are like blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, that affects every population. And clearly, importance to that is paramount. We have to reduce that because these are lifestyle issues, whether you have the genes or you don't have the genes. If you don't look after these things, you will get into trouble. So the whole focus for the last so many years in prevention of coronary artery disease has been rightfully to get down on the environmental stuff. Yeah. Means get your weight down, get your sugar down, get your BP down, get your cholesterol down, do your exercises, and that can bring you. But despite all this, Indians will have coronary artery disease 10 years before the white population. They will have severe disease, more popular. And, when you don't know something, you just blame it on, oh, it's your genes, So that sort of thing, So this is the problem with coronary artery disease till now. Previously, we had, for example, there are certain conditions, say like very high cholesterol, which can go in families. It's called as familial hypercholesterolemia. It is, it goes by one gene. It's a monogenic issue. One gene creates that. So if you identify a high cholesterol and do a genetic study and find that one gene abnormal, then you could say, okay, this is clearly genetic. Your father had it, your mother had it, you will have it, your children will have it. So even if you take high doses of cholesterol medicine, standard tablets may not bring it down. We may have to use some injectables, which are there now available, to bring the cholesterol down, and they were prone to very severe disease. But these are very infrequent, these problems. These was 1 in 200 is this chance of you getting this problem in high cholesterol. So this is not the norm. So when you don't know something, you would say, oh, there's some gene, I don't know what the hell it is, but I think South Asians have some genetic issue which is creating a problem. And it was a bit abstract. And we were all the time looking at the environment to modify, which is rightfully correct, because even if, as I said, even if you have bad genes, if you change your environment, you will have less problems.
Okay. Thank you. So do you think it is critical to have a strong system to tackle CAD in India, all kind of coronary artery disease in India?
So again, the question is in two parts. One is the primary thing what you need to do, and that is the primary healthcare preventive program, which means, be exercising, eat less, get your sugar down, get your fats down, all those sort of things which are important. Get the pollution down, get your stress down. But this is a generally common thing. Plus, if your cholesterols are high, you take a cholesterol lowering medicine. If your sugars are high, you take the sugar medicines. So this is of primary importance. We should not dilute that. That is the most important thing, and we should do it. Now that we have some scoring available, that will help us to identify in a large population who are at the primary high risk for aggressive treatment. When I mean aggressive, means extreme loss of weight, extreme blood sugars down, extreme lipid lowering. These are, difficult to do for everybody. I cannot tell everybody take 80 milligram of a cholesterol lowering medicine because a South Asian is at high risk, because he may not be at high risk. There may be some other Indian who is at high risk. So the problem is these scores will help us to identify a small population who is at high risk in the South Asian population, whom we can aggressively lifestyle and treat with medicines.
Okay. So do you think that genetic testing in this scenario would help in treating CAD?
Definitely, yes. Now, once you have said that South Asians are higher than Caucasians and East Asians and somebody else, then the issue is then what is the gene? So now no single gene determines heart disease. Unfortunately, there are only very few genes which are, like I told you, the hypercholesteremia gene, which is a single gene, which is clear-cut one gene and creates a problem. Most people have we call it as a mixture of bad genes in various proportions.
Okay.
So now if I get one gene abnormal, it doesn't mean that I'll get heart disease. I also need another so-and-so genes. So it's like a, it's like a bhel puri, if you know what is a bhel puri.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So you get it right only when you have the whole thing right. If you put only some imli or when you put some spice or you put something, the bhel puri won't be right.
Yes.
So to get the problem, you have to have a right mix of those genes. So to get that genetic correct traits was very difficult before, because to get a whole sequence genoming was not only difficult, extremely expensive, say 10 years ago. And with all that information, nobody had any clue what to do with that information. You had a lot of DNA pairs data, but you didn't know what to do.
How to utilize the data.
How to analyze the data and what to see. So therefore, the PRS is a way of how to use that data to stratify your risk.
Okay. So the PRS, that we're not talking about PRS, pathogenic risk score technique. You think that would be like one of the relevant technique now to diagnose the CAD and assess the treatment. So how relevant will it be? Because there will be some techniques which are already going on. So how it's going to sync and what more is going to give apart from what system we already have?
So this is a completely new, different way of thinking. So this is not like what we do before. You have a Down syndrome person, you just do a chromosome analysis, say, okay, this is Down syndrome, or you just do one gene or one chromosome or one or two something. It is now, you're taking a whole guy's genome. So principally, to just make it short, it's a very complicated thing what I'm saying, but to make it very, very crisp and simple for people to understand is that no one gene determines that you will get heart disease, except a few, like what I told you, the cholesterol gene, the monogenic gene. Most heart disease comes because of a polygenic mix. Now, there are it's about 60 genes worldwide, at least now. It may change tomorrow, it may become more, but 60 genes which seem to predispose to more heart disease, at least in the European ancestry group. As people of European descent, at least 60 genes we know created that. We had never any information in South Asian data. So these 60 genes, okay, they are going to be a problem. Now what you do, you take the whole genome sequencing, which is like millions of pairs of thing. Then you check those 60. You can't be looking at all 1 million. So what you'll do is 60 of those you'll look at. Those 60 genes we'll look at in each of these patients and what frequency it comes out.
Okay.
Then what you do is you have a control population and a disease population in Europe. So what you do is, I don't have heart disease, but you have heart disease, say. So you take 1 million people, 100,000 people who are normal and 100,000 people who have disease states. You take those 60 gene pairs in both groups and see what is different in these 60 genes. It is not one gene, 60 genes, and in what frequency. And with some technologies, which obviously are very, very sophisticated, now you can make out with frequencies that in the European descent, that these were the 60 genes which were more important for people who had heart disease compared to people who have heart disease. So this is called as a GWAS study. GWAS. Okay. So with European dysentery GWAS studies, we knew that these genes were important. Okay. Now what you do is you throw it at the Asian population and see whether we can find, are those 60 genes the same genes which are important in South Asia, or is something else? At least for a start, what they did was they looked at in UK from the biobank. They looked at they had some, I think 600,000 or something people's genes. From that genes, they looked at the South Asian group. That means the Indian, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, and look at their genes and the European genes. What they found interestingly was the same 60 genes even in the Indian or Asian people, were predisposing to the heart problem. But the absolute risk was 1.6 times of an European guy. So the same genes, if I look at, and if they find in higher frequency, they seem to have, yes, risk, but 1.5 times the risk of the European guys. So it simply means the same genes exist for Asians also, but it increases the risk in those Asians by 1.6 times.
It's more vulnerable to it.
Yeah, so now we are clear that the same genes are a problem. The same genes and the same frequencies give problems, but they give more problems for South Asian, therefore they are more prone. Okay. Then what they did the same study. This is what Amit did. Amit Khera is the person who did the basic work along. So then they replicated it in the Bangladesh group studies, and they found the same, similar in Bangladesh. And then they came to us and said, why, MedGenome came to us and said, why don't we run it in India? So we did about 5 centers and we took about 1,000 controls and 1,800 disease state patients. And what interestingly found, again same. So what does this all mean? And the risk is also the same, 1.6.
Okay.
So the absolute risk is 1.6 times of the European group. And it continues whether you are in UK, whether you're in Bangladesh, or whether you're in India. So and what they do is, I don't want to go to more complicated things. They have to throw this graph onto ancestries and all that, but I'm not going to go on that. But in common sense thing is that the same genes seem to have the same problems in Asian people, but more. Now, what is the most important thing is, okay, I can generalize and say, okay, all you guys are 1.5 times more riskier than Europe. But for Ajit, or for you, would it be more risky? That is personalized medicine. See, there is a guy who smokes, who does what he wants, eats what he wants, he never develops heart disease. There's a guy who runs a marathon every day, doesn't eat anything, just eats ghas-poos and he gets heart disease. So this is personalized medicine because everybody behaves differently and his body and genes behave differently. So what is PRS score is a number which you will get from your genes. From your 60-odd genes, what you have, we'll give you a score. That score is like your score in the exam. So the top 5%, that means that if I have a risk which is very high, on the top 5% of the score, those guys will have extremely high risk of heart disease. And they will have the same risk of a person with a monogenic hyperlipidemia. Monogenic hyperlipidemia develop heart attacks when they are 20, 25. They don't come at 60, 70. Because the high cholesterols are 300 and 400. They come very early. But people in that top 5% who otherwise look normal to you, their cholesterols are normal, their sugars are normal, they don't have blood pressure, they don't smoke, they're thin and lean and thin. They may have a family history, but their scores will be very high. So if their scores are very high, then you can tell these chaps, you make nothing, you may run all your marathons with your. And for this, you have some medications which we can give, like cholesterol-lowering medicines at high dose. Today, there are many other new medicines which will come in the future, which will give. So you need aggressive lifestyle plus this medicines for those people. So PRS score is a polygenic risk of an individual calculated by taking a little blood of his, looking at his 60-odd genes, and calculating what his risk is. In the South Asian group, overall the risk is 1.6 times more. That is 1. 2, for a particular individual, it may be even 4 times more if his risk is in the top score. So if he is in the high risk group, he says, my friend, you're at very high risk. You need to take your things seriously. Your lifestyle has to be very, very correct. And you have to take your medications also correct.
So, Doctor, I have a question here. What do you think?
I thought you disappeared, Shakun.
No. I was listening very patiently, but I was wondering, what do you think about the adoption of this approach? Because comparatively new, and obviously initially when you launch something like this, there's a skepticism in the community, and
Well, skepticism is warranted, and that is how medicine or the science improves. You cannot be not skeptical and just take everything on face value.
Correct.
So I don't think that we should be. But let me put it one thing. We were skeptical about so many things. We were skeptical when Down syndrome was a chromosomal disorder.
Yeah.
We are skeptical about so many things like medicines today, where you can treat intrauterine certain disorders of, because of genes. But the problem, it was not that we didn't know that there was a genetic disorder. We didn't know what the gene was. That was the problem. It was not that in coronary artery disease, diabetes, and so many other things, it's a bit abstract. It's a bit like God saying, okay, there is a problem here, but I don't know the problem.
Right.
But then how do you tackle it?
Sure.
So now we are getting some angle and some handle on the whole thing. This is not perfected yet. I'm talking 60 genes. It may become 1,000 genes tomorrow.
Sure.
Because as we do, but we've got some handle now on things. So the first question is, what is the science behind it? Now we have validated science published in good journals showing that these scores are reasonably validated. That is number one.
Right.
Number two is, can we do it in a population? When I say people come for a master health checkup to us, they do all their numbers and come to me and say, sir, will I get a heart attack or not? He's a 40-year-old guy. He's otherwise healthy guy.
Sure.
I look at his numbers, I look at his weight, I ask him a few questions, and then I say, see, it is very unlikely. You please continue your exercise, keep your cholesterol down. And 2 years later, he gets a heart attack. Then he comes and says, see, doctor, I did all these tests. How did I get the heart attack? And you sort of vaguely say something because you don't know it. You're saying, oh, there may be some stress at home, there may be stress at work, you have some, pollution and all that, and some vague answers you give. Right. But this is not, this is scientific, that this gentleman would have been told that you would get a heart disease in 10 years, X percentage of time. His PRS scores was high. Sure. And what I could have done is not just told him that to go home and just exercise and eat less. I would have also told him, see, you have to take this cholesterol medicine at a high dose, despite no symptoms, despite your cholesterol being normal, so-called normal. You still need to be trashing it down to say less than 50. So that we don't have heart disease. But at the same time, there's another guy who has, again, the same presentation to me, and his polygenic scores are very low.
Sure.
Then I will not blindly go and give him a cholesterol medicine. I'll say, you just take your lifestyle for pakka, that's all what we need. And the third thing is adaptation depends also on cost.
Sure. And you see this being prescribed after some initial preliminary examinations have happened, and or do you see this as the first test, and then so what is the sequence, and where do you think this would fit in the cycle?
For a guy who has worked in this field for 25 years and seen the genetics of coronary artery disease in India, you ask me, I would possibly do it in the first few tests. Apart from asking somebody, are you diabetic? Do you smoke? Do you have a family history of heart disease? And what is your sugar and cholesterol? My next thing would be the polygenic risk score.
Okay.
To me, that's because I understood the point.
Sure.
Most people would not even understand what you're trying to tell them. But polygenic risk score, they say, what is this? So what we need to first is educate people that what this whole thing is about. We never had a way of evaluating your genetic risks. And simply by a little bit of blood.
Right.
And number two, what will be the cost of that test? Suppose I'm going to say is 1 lakh of rupees the test. Nobody will.
No, obviously, yeah.
But at a few thousands, people will say, okay, if I'm doing a blood sugar at 300 rupees and a cholesterol lipid profile at 1,000 rupees, why not get this done? So the second is the cost. So one is understanding, two is the availability of this test. Because again, I may have the cost down, whatever down, but if the test is not available in your hospital or in your city, you cannot do these tests. It's not easy to do this test.
Correct, yeah.
That is two. And then three, we'll have to validate this in a large population model. It's not that we have written the final Bible and closed the book. No. We have just started something in genetics, which will be modified in the future. And we will have to make some tweaks at that and make some final new scores finally.
Sure. Okay. Sure. Kamalika, you have anything else?
Yes, a couple of more questions.
Yeah, sure.
So, seeing, like we already discussed about it, like even people in 20s are prone to CAD. So, is it more in India, again, putting it back to Indian context?
So we have done extensive work on this, and we found very unusually that a person at 30 or 40 who develops heart disease does not have the traditional risk factors, which the West will say at they are 30 and 40. So a Caucasian who gets 40 at 40 gets heart attack. It is certainly either smoking or high cholesterol.
Okay.
In India, yes, smoking causes 1/3 of the heart attacks in people less than 40, but 67% of them will have no high cholesterol, no sugar. They'll be lean and thin, and their blood pressures will be normal. Now, why do they get heart disease? So then you will keep on saying, you would always think, there may be stress, there's urbanization, pollution, all those sort of big things. But yes, all that may contribute. But what is a group of people who are doing all the things right, who are falling dead suddenly in a running on a marathon, they just fall dead, who are really lean and thin guys? Now, those people, when you really look at, if you go through their details, they will not have a classic family history. That means your father, mother had heart disease. They will say that my uncle had heart attack at 40, or my second degree relative had some problem at a young age.
Yes.
Because what happens is, every person who has, they may all have the genetic, the father, mother could also have the genetic problem. But this will not express unless you have an environmental major issue. So a person whose father is 80, father has lived to 80, and the mother has lived to 70 or 80, does not mean the son will or daughter will not get a heart attack at 40. That is, despite they not having obvious things like smoking and eating whatever they want, they may have a slight change on lifestyle. The father, mother may have been extremely looking after themselves, extremely rigid in their lifestyle. So they could live to 80 and 70, even with bad genes. But a youngster, he may have a little bit here and there with food. He may be a bit more stressed than the other guy, parents, or he may be more urbanized than that person. And he will get at half the age. So if you identify a polygenic risk score in these young people, you have to tell them, okay, your father's score is also high, but he did all these things right. Can you follow all this? If you can't follow, you do better these things.
So like we are anticipating that in future, this test will become one of those annual or 6 months tests that we do for thyroid, diabetes. We can do this test also. So if that is the way it becomes in the future, so what is the age when one should get tested? Like how soon can we?
So the first thing is that these risks are for life. So you need only one test. You don't keep on doing like sugar and cholesterol every 6 months. This is a risk which you are born with. So you can't keep changing your risk. So this will have to be done once in your lifetime.
One time, yeah. That's
how
correct.
soon we should do it? Like in a 20?
Okay, so let me tell you this way. The thing I will start with is, if I get a person who comes to me and says that, see, in my family, a few people died suddenly. And they were never known to have smokers or everything. And they had a bypass surgery or angioplasty at 40. I will take that guy first for a PRS score. For sure, I'll take his PRS score. The second thing is, once we validate it and be sure what we are saying is absolutely correct, because we don't want to frighten everybody out, do a score and say, your risk is very damn high. And like, to give you a simple example, how dramatic a treatment can be. The BRAX gene in the breast, if you identify, you have 100% chance you will get malignancy of the breast. That means if somebody's parents had breast cancer or your aunt had breast cancer, and you come and do a gene study for that and find a BRAX gene, then it is sure that you will get breast cancer. So what is the treatment? Right now, what you can do, you cannot prevent breast cancer. So what do you do? So this is what Angelina Jolie did. She had a bilateral mastectomy now. So that's an extreme way of using a genetic study to decide what to do for your life, because it's more important to not have breast cancer than to have the issues related to having the breast. So she took that extreme step, and this is clearly validated science. So suppose I come and tell you that your risk of heart disease is extremely high at 20, you are in the top 5% percentile, and now you need to have cholesterol lowering medicine at 80 milligram. There's some new medicines like injections, which will bring down your cholesterol to 20s. You have bad cholesterol to 20. You have to take it, otherwise you will get heart disease. Then that could be a solution for a person, but that is only for that person. I cannot give it to everybody.
Yeah.
You understood what I meant. So that's the real potential of this testing.
Okay. So apart from this technique can be used for any other diseases also.
Yeah. It will be there for
different.
I think polygenic risk scores will come for diabetes, will come for cancers, will come for everything. See, ultimately, most disorders are basically, even if the environment does something wrong, are in your system. Is genetic. It is not that people didn't die 100 years ago of heart attack. Of course they did. And so the genes are always there. And you go and ask your grandparents what somebody died. Oh, you say he suddenly dropped dead at home at 40. Now, this thing is not that everything is lifestyle. So even then there were cancers. Yes, today things may have got worse because you're living longer and not dying of infectious disease. Two, you have more environmental problems, so you get into trouble. But these things are important.
Okay. And do you see any limitation of this technique?
Right now, it's not fully validated. So at this time, I will not create a thing that is a panacea for all the world's problems. This is just a start. So we'll have to fine twist it, and obviously all of us will be working further towards validating it in more Indians and more patients with younger heart disease. Maybe that will become more sensitive, and then we will sort of get the score refined. Let me say that. Okay. The second thing, this is the first time this has been nicely done in a small study. I wouldn't say it's a big study, but it is in a big journal.
Right.
The Journal of the American College of Cardiology is the top 3 journals in cardiology in the world. So if it gets published, it means that there is a lot of sense in this, what they say.
Right.
The third thing is MedGenome has come to India and has helped us to do this thing from India. And I'm sure they will help us to do it at a reasonable cost.
Right.
So there's not some fancy, 50,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupee cost test. It's not going to work like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So all these 3 have to be subtly told when you write it up for the press or the health worker.
Sure. Yeah, so that's it from my end right now, Doctor. And I look forward to, engaging more with you, and we'll work through the press meet as well.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Ajit. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Bye.